So that's your difference. So most people will understand physical therapy because it says it in the name, physical. So anything to do with physical movement is going to be what a physical therapist addresses. And then occupational therapy, it's tricky because you think an occupation is just a job, but we consider it anything that you like to do. So including hobbies, anything that takes your time. So whatever you're doing during the day, getting dressed, brushing your teeth, going to the restroom, those are all areas we take a look at too. So it's more encompassing as a whole person versus just your physical ailment.
So what this name come from? Occupational?
Because it's
like a job, career, or whatever.
No, so I think that's the confusing part. So the start of occupational therapy happened back in the war times. So a lot of people would be injured and coming back from war and feeling really depressed and sad because they can't do anything. So what these therapists did was start presenting important things or purposeful things into the life to help them enjoy life again, right? So it started all kind of in a mental health aspect where you feel better about yourself by doing something that brings some sort of purpose, right? And that's in general to life. And so that's where occupational therapists stepped in, was physically, if you're limited, what can I do to help find something that's important to you that you can still do? And so that was where it all started from. And that's why they call it occupational, because it's an occupation in leisure activity is what we would call it. Yeah, so essentially occupational therapists, they're like middle between speech therapists and physical therapists in pay. And it is the least known and understood out of all the therapies. So typically when people ask what you do, it'll be kind of confusing, and it's a good time to just educate. And I think like for a while, a lot of Eastern countries didn't even have occupational therapy, but you'll see like a huge growth in that and the recognition of like the importance of having additional help through occupational therapy. Yeah, so it's very people related. You're around people all the time. You have to be able to learn to collaborate. There's a lot of teamwork. Communication is super important because you're talking to parents or your patient, and then you can talk to kids too. And some of these kids don't even understand you. So being creative, flexible is really also important. Adaptive. These are all the kind of things that help out a lot. So I think if you're thinking if this is a right fit for me, if you are a very like black and white person, so like if you're very good at school because you know the answers, but you have trouble with the things in between, the gray area, then occupational therapy may not be a good fit, but physical therapy and speech therapy might be a good fit. I think with occupational therapy, you have to be able to recognize there's not always an answer. So if you are someone who has to have an answer and able to do something, it may not be a good fit. But if you're willing to try and make mistakes and learn as you go, it's a really good place to be. So taking that into account of where you think you're at and what you think you're really good at, I think that's one of the things to think about. Occupational therapists tend to be more of the creative types and the artsy types. So if you know about type A personality and type B personality, occupational therapists are definitely more type B, where we are like fair at organization, but we're really good at thinking outside the box of a lot of stuff. And we're usually more easygoing about certain things because we tend to be more adaptive. I think probably another thing you're thinking about, I guess in regards to medical fields, you definitely need to have the knowledge. And so I think school helps you build that base knowledge, but you actually just learn a lot on the job. And so while school provided me a fairly good foundation, it's very different than other jobs, I think, where you are technically skilled, but in occupational therapy, you'll be more technically skilled after you go through your training versus coming out of school. Like I said in the beginning, there's a variety of places that you can work at. So don't limit being like, oh, I don't like kids, so I can't do this. Or I don't really like talking one-on-one. It's not really my thing. You don't have to do that. You can think way out of the box in where occupational therapy can go. So our basic prereqs for occupational therapy is very psychology based. So if you're into psychology, this could be an area. A lot of people have an undergrad degree in psychology or early childhood development, or even kinesiology, so movement of the body. Those are all typical undergraduate degrees that you'll see, but clearly anybody with whatever undergrad degree can get into occupational therapy, because I did architecture and that's completely opposite of what you would expect. So anything is possible with occupational therapy. Yeah, so honestly, equal job opportunities across board, because Sherry's asking about physical therapy versus occupational therapy pay difference. I would say there is a pay difference. It's not huge pay difference. I would say probably about five to 10 grand possibly difference. Just varies. The areas that you're going to get paid the most for, at least for occupational therapy wise, would be in like nursing homes. That's easy 6 figures. Nursing homes, long-term care, where you're serving a geriatric population, that's easy 6 figures. If you're going to do school, they're actually paying more because there's a higher need and they're recognizing it. And in general, everywhere right now due to the pandemic, there's just a shortage on staff. So your pay is going to be higher now than it was way back in the day. And then everything else is just hospital, you get fair pay. It's probably medium compared to the geriatric population. ECI is called early childhood intervention. That gives you really good money too. And if you do home health, so therapists can actually go into the home too to treat patients, and you'll get probably close to 6 on that too. So if that's like a big factor, like I would definitely think about it. But there's always positives and negatives, right? And then physical therapy, you're usually more stuck into like a hospital setting or a clinic setting. You can definitely do home health. You have less options, I think, as a physical therapist to do more with the community than you would if you were an occupational therapist. But either way, anything in the rehab, you're pretty much guaranteed a job. So if you want job security, I would do that, because in architecture, you don't have that job security. You kind of go with the economy. So if we are in a downturn, which we kind of are starting to get into now, then people are going to have less money to build. People are going to save money. And so your chance to lose your job is much higher. So hopefully that answers your question in regards to that. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I think you build really good friendships and relationships with your coworkers because it tends to be a very more close-knit community. I share office space. It's an open office space. And so we're constantly sharing and talking about our kids. And so if you like to have that community and that close-knit group, I think therapy is a good place to be, because it is a lot smaller unit than you would in like doctor or nursing, where you can just kind of move all over the place. We are pretty much centralized, and we see each other every day. So, and we share the same kids. So there's that, and you would share the same patients. So good to communicate, good for friendship building, relationships. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, feel free to ask, but I think.
So what is the most rewarding part as an occupational therapist? And what is the most frustrating part of as an occupational therapist?
Yeah, I think the most rewarding, right? The whole point that I left architecture was to have more relationship building, like to feel like what you're doing is impactful, right? So you can see a direct result immediately, right? So unlike if you are doing tech or if you're doing engineering, it's completely different, right? You're producing a product or you're producing something, but you never necessarily see the end result and you don't see it as fast. So this is an immediate result that you're seeing and the immediate impact that you can see. So like a doctor impacts a person's life, you can save it, right? So doctors can save lives. So essentially we're bettering lives. And so if you're looking for a big change in reaching people and feeling like there's worth in what you're doing, then this is a great place to be, because you are helping to make lives better for these people. And worst thing is, or the most frustrating thing is no matter how much you want to help people, it doesn't mean they always take your help, right? So while they're there, they may not do anything that you're asking them to do. And so you have to be okay with people not listening and responding to what you're giving them and not taking your help. And so as frustrating as that is, I think it's like a good learning point in like, this is as much as I can do. And so they can choose to take it or they can choose not to do it. And so that's probably the most frustrating thing.
Can you give us a very good specific example as your patient, or I don't know what you call patient or client, from the beginning and then after a certain period, and what kind of improvement he or she has, and how does the family respond to your treatment to their kids?
Yeah. So I don't know how much of you guys out there are know about or have experienced or even engaged with somebody with autism or even have family members with autism, but that's a big thing right now in the health world, increased diagnosis of autism. And so for me personally, I somewhat specialize in autism. And so I work with a lot of kids with autism. And I have kids where just like a few times I tell parents what to do, I work with them, there's already a significant improvement. And so parents are extremely happy. So you can see that. They voice it, they tell you that they're extremely happy. And that's the thing, they don't even have to tell you, but you can visibly see the changes. So I think that's what's great about occupational therapy is you get to see them every week. Essentially, I see these kids every week for 6 months at a time, maybe even longer sometimes. And so you have that whole time to build a relationship and see it, and see these changes, which is what helps to encourage you to keep on going. And then parents are extremely happy and they're always telling you like what changes they've seen, what's been really good. And whether you're a direct impact of that, or it could be something else in their life that's helped, just being there and seeing these changes and the parents' response to that is something that's really good. And I think most other jobs, you don't have the opportunity to do that. Because even as a doctor, you're seeing these kids like one time, twice, depending on where you're at. And here it's less stressful in that lives necessarily aren't on the line because of what you do. So you can just help with that improvement with it. I think Sherry had a question. So do you combine degrees and what is additional certificate, major or diploma that OT students try to get? Oh yeah. So with occupational therapy, there are, you can get certified in a variety of things. The main ones are a pediatric certification, neuro certification, and there's even like a home modification certification. Those are like the three major ones that people can get, and that's additional testing. So you have to do testing in order to get those. You can specifically get other certifications that aren't testing related. That's just pure education. So I have two. So I'm certified in ADHD. So I'm a certified provider in ADHD, and I'm also a certified provider in autism. And so there are areas that if you have interest, you can continue to pursue and make yourself better. And then Kyrie wrote, is undergrad for physical therapy kinesiology? Yeah, so for physical therapy, the very typical major that you're going to see is kinesiology. Everyone usually has a kinesiology degree. You'll also see physical therapy backgrounds being athletic trainers, certified strengthening coaches, CSCS, strength and conditioning. So typically you'll find if you're an athlete or you really enjoy sports, that's where the physical therapists go.
So what?
Question?
I'm sorry, you have another question or what?
No, does anybody have any other questions?
Okay, so maybe I'll ask a question. Can you give me a little bit more detail? I'm very intrigued. How do you help the patient with the autism? Give us a detailed example, and what did you do? Make them improve in a few months.
That's a hard
Just pick
hard
one
answer.
example. Of course, don't mention name or anything.
No, so it's hard not because of what I'm doing, but to understand. So autism is a huge spectrum, right? So for those of you guys who don't know, autism, you have what we consider severe. So severe would be the ones who, I don't know if anybody's seen them, but they typically don't look at anybody. They don't recognize people are in the room. They enjoy being by themselves. They tend to be kind of in their own little world. They are unable to do a lot of stuff, not because they physically can't, but because they're typically doing their own thing. They usually don't understand how to even play with toys. So there's a lot of throwing. So for me, I have a kiddo who came in who basically the only thing he did was throw and run around. So he couldn't even sit, couldn't even do anything like that. And by engaging in play, which is what we consider that to be kids' occupation, right? So they don't have jobs, they don't have anything, they have to learn how to play. And as weird as it is, teaching play skills and teaching engagement is what I do with these kids. And so if you really enjoy kids and you really enjoy playing and being creative, it's a good place to be, is occupational therapy. And so some of these skills that you're just like, oh, play, that's so easy. Like, I know how to play with toys. It's really hard if you don't know how to play, how to learn to play with toys. And I think if you guys went out there and I was like, hey, take this toy and do something fun with it, it's hard. Not everyone has that ability to pretend and create something from something that was meant for something else. And so that's part of it. And so with me and this boy, all we do is just play, but in a very directed manner. And so I think that's the part of the gray area that it's hard to explain because it's not black and white. And so when I say play, you guys are like, oh, play, that seems so easy. Like, why would I need to pay anybody to play with my kid? But I think if you ever go, I highly recommend, if you're even interested in PT, OT, or speech, there are opportunities out there for high schoolers to come and just observe. And so if you guys, or even volunteer, I highly recommend that as an area to check out if you guys are interested in any of the rehab, because a lot of hospitals ask for volunteers, and they also ask for even observers. So high schoolers, you guys can call into your hospitals and ask if you can observe. an OT, a PT, or a speech therapist, if those are the areas that you're interested in, to get a better idea of what they do. Because I think it's hard to explain because it is such a broad thing, and especially in the pediatric setting, I think it's very different than if you were working with adults.
Good. And there's a question is that can you become a OT with just any undergrad?
Yeah, you honestly can. So any undergraduate degree, as long as you have the prerequisites, and the typical prerequisites are across the board very similar. You need to have certain psychology classes. You're going to need to have anatomy, and you're going to need to have physiology. And then for me, my prereqs, I did all of those. And then you also need to have like a cadaver lab. So where you actually work with bodies. Then those are your basic requirements. So any undergraduate degree will work, and then you can just go in and get your prerequisites. So I went, architecture clearly has not a lot of overlap. So I had a few psychology classes that carried over, but I had to retake a lot also because a lot of those credits expired. So I just retook a lot of classes, took anatomy, took physiology, and then got in, and then I had to take another summer course where I had to do a cadaver lab. So at any point you can transition. So I think that's one of the things that's great about therapies. And in general, I think it allows you more freedom. So I think a lot of people go into undergrad thinking that I like that pressure to choose at that moment, but you guys are like 18, 20, like that's so young. And honestly, you probably haven't seen a lot of this stuff and still aren't quite sure what you're really good at. So as you grow and as you develop in those college years, which are really important years, you think you're stuck because that's the degree you have. But you really have opportunities as you develop and learn more about yourself and what you're good at, what you're looking for. It's an awesome opportunity to just jump out and try something new, and it's easy. So it only took me probably maybe like 4 years total to like finish everything and become an OT. So that's
also
completely opposite.
I think the community college give you a lot of chance to just make it up for prerequisite for the occupational therapist.
Yeah, so I think and as long as for the Asian community, I think we put a lot of emphasis on going to a good college, right? So our whole idea behind this is like, oh, we need to go to a great undergrad. We need to go to a really good undergrad because then we can get a better job. And I think what you'll look at is for those jobs that require higher degrees, so any type of graduate degree, that's not as important, honestly. So you're like, oh, I went to a really good undergrad, so that means I have to go to a really good graduate degree. And so I can't take prerequisite courses at a community college, which is false. So all you need to do is get into the school with whatever credit you need to get into. And so that's the thing. You just have to get into a program. You just have to pass the program. You don't need A's in the program. You need to know enough to pass, and you have to know enough to pass the boards. So I think when you think like there's a lot of pressure in going to high schools or like private schools, there's really none of that. And I think that's the nice thing about it is there's starting to be a lot more schools for occupational therapy. And so if you are like, this is going to cost a lot of money and we don't have the money to do this, there are schools with really that do not cost a lot, public universities that offer great programs, and that all you really need to do is just pass the boards in the end. To get a job, nobody looks at your GPA after graduate school. There's no GPA that I'm looking at. I'm not looking at how much you've done. I'm looking at where you did your, what we call clinical rotation. So after you've graduated and you finished your studying part of school, you go and do two clinical rotations. So those are 12 weeks apiece, and they're in different areas. And so all I care about is, did you pass your boards? Are you licensed? And then where you worked. essentially worked being what rotations you had.
So it's a very common question now. So I think you had experience to interview, recruit, and hire the, just college. I mean, not just whoever just got an occupational graduate degree or a doctorate degree.
Yeah.
So how do you tell who's good, who's not good, and what kind of basic requirement, personality, skill, common sense, everything can show, okay, this person have a great potential to be a good occupational therapist, and this person just cannot be a good one.
So, I mean, the main thing is personality, right? So you have to be able to engage and communicate well, but your personality, and it's different for pediatrics. So I'll say this, pediatrics is very different because your personality needs to be typically higher energy. You have to present approachable. So that's the thing, right? Kids aren't going to come to you if you are not approachable. So your personality, you have to exude some sort of, I wouldn't say it's innocence, but childlike presence is very helpful. You have to be able to relate and be willing to ask questions. And I think that's part of it, because especially for new people, and I think in general too, our culture doesn't promote asking questions a lot. I think it looks, because when you ask a question, it looks like you don't know. And so you never want to be a person that you don't know the answers to. But in this job, it's really important to ask questions, because you want to make use of your resources, which are the other therapists out there who have a lot of experience. And so a person willing to ask questions and a person who's relatable and really genuine and honest, and who can adapt, is like a candidate that I look for. You definitely have to have knowledge for sure, and we'd ask you some of those things, but also recognizing where you are not very knowledgeable and where your weaknesses are is really important.
What kind of talent do you think required to be a top-notch occupational therapist?
I honestly think the talent part is important. It's definitely important, because you can see, I think you just have to be able to understand naturally people. So that's your talent. So a talent you don't build up, right? So essentially what we're saying is talent is given to you. And in this sense, God's given you talent, right? So the idea is that God's given you something that nobody else can learn or do. And so talent in this would be being able to read people. So you need an emotional intelligence to be able to read how a patient is reacting, what kind of day they're having, what they enjoy, and how can I turn that into a therapeutic activity for them, and how can I make things different and use different things to create an activity for this patient or client that they'd enjoy, but still works on what they need to work on. And so I think that's the main thing, is being able to read people in order to motivate them. So that's the hardest part. If you can't read people, then it makes it a lot harder. It's not an undoable job, and you can do this job. But I think that talent, if you are like, wow, I'm really good at understanding people, and you feel like you can just have a conversation with people no matter what, this may be a really good placement for you guys.
So what do you think the major difference between working in the nursing home and the working at the pediatric?
I mean, clearly one, the environment is completely different. You are at a place, nursing home, right? It's close, as bad as it is to say and to think about, that's like nearing the end of life. So in one end, you're at nearing end of life, and at the other end, you're at the beginning of life. So that's a huge difference. But the idea behind nursing home too is, so you want them to get better, with an understanding that there's still limits to what they physically can do. It's much more repetitive. You don't have to be as creative. There's a lot of what we call self-care. So activities of daily living, which is a lot of dressing, teaching people how to dress, teaching them how to use the restroom, going to the restroom. So you have to be very comfortable with bodies if you are doing a nursing home rotation, or if you decide to go in the nursing home. It can be very sad and depressing there because, like I said, everyone's nearing end of life. And then it's very repetitive routine in a nursing home or a long care facility. While with pediatrics, you have to constantly change it up because kids will not tolerate you doing the same thing every time. Like, you have to make it interesting. And you can't tell them they have to do it because they don't listen to you, because that's kids, right? So, you know, your parents tell you to do something, you're not listening to them because they told you what to do. So it's the same thing. So how can I get these kids to do what I want to do in a way that I want them to do it? So I think it's two very, very, very different things.
So do you think your faith in Christ help you to be a better occupational therapist, or how did they impact your job?
Faith is definitely important in it, but it's tricky, right? So I think when you're in the medical field, I think that's always an area as a Christian, because you have to have faith, right, that God heals. And so, but you also have to have that medical knowledge and medical knowledge that not everybody gets healed, right? When I treat, I am treating based on medical knowledge. I'm not treating on my faith that God heals. I'm treating on what I know to be true in the medical area and in what people have done. So faith in knowing that God's going to make the changes no matter what. So like, and that's in general, right? So we can only do what we can do. And if there's going to be true change, clearly it's God who's making the change, but I'm assisting as best I can, and I can only do what I can do. And so if true change is going to happen, then God will do that change. And then so faith in knowing that, faith in that God's providing me with the wisdom to make these right decisions and right choices. And I think faith in knowing that, like, this is where I'm placed. So that helps out a lot in recognizing, like, my gifts, my talents that God's given me has aligned appropriately. And so I'm in a good spot now. So you don't want to be in a place where I've been before, where you go to the job and it's miserable. And every day you're like, oh, I can't believe I'm going. And you're in this repetitive kind of thing. And I think with this, having the faith that God put me here, it helps with encouraging that purposeful drive to continue to go every day, and that anything is possible. And I think you see that, which is the cool part. Like, crazy things happen in hospital settings, and we hear about miracles all the time with healing and stuff, but it is crazy things happen. And I think that's the cool thing about being part of a hospital setting, is seeing like the unimaginable, or the progress and the massive changes that are made for somebody who you would never expect these changes to be made.
Can you give me some example, your own personal experience? Because one just asked a question: have you run into the divine healing?
Yeah, so yes, and so it's tricky, right? Because you're saying divine healing is healing that's like, we have no reason to understand why there's healing, right? So yes, but it's not the healing that we think if I say healing. So there's this girl in the hospital, bad car accident, her whole family's in it, a teenage girl, severe brain injury, severe. She was doing so bad, they decided to, what we call pull the plug. So they were disconnecting her from her machines, and they were just going to let her pass away. And then all of a sudden she just started breathing. And so she started breathing, she started improving. So this girl who was supposed to pass away is fully alive. And so that's healing, right? So somebody who was definitely on death's bed, is healed in the sense that she is breathing, she is living, she is able to understand what we're saying. However, she is not physically healed in the sense that she cannot walk, she cannot move both arms equally. She still has a lot of deficits, but in that sense, we have the healing in that she's alive. But we don't have the healing in that she's fully able to walk and move and be back to her normal self. So yeah, I think that's some of the things in which you have to take a look at is like healing, divine healing. That's divine healing in my eyes because she was going to die. Like she was supposed to die and she didn't. But it's not a healing that we would think about physically. She's not physically healed, but she's alive. And so that's some of what you see too. And you have to be okay with that. But there are people who have like near drowning incidents, right? So little kids who have been underwater, who are no longer breathing, have needed CPR, and then fully recover with no brain injury. So divine healing, right? But that's not always the case. So yeah, so definitely you see that a lot, and which is one of the coolest things that you can see. But you also have to change your perspective on what healing means to a certain extent.
So what's the most miraculous case you ever run into?
Man, there's a lot. I have another kiddo that I've seen in his mom's womb. He's a twin and he had basically no amniotic fluid in the womb. So essentially you need fluid to survive in there. And he basically had an air pocket. And they were expecting him to pass away. They're like, oh, we'll just let you carry this through the pregnancy and then he'll most likely pass away, but you still have the other baby, so it's okay. He survived and he was born at like 25. So really premature, we'll say that. So he was a very premature baby and he had to stay in NICU forever, but he survived and he's functional, he's moving around, he still has some physical deficits, but he is moving and he is participating in activities that he should for his age. But like this small of a space for him to breathe is all he had essentially, and he survived that. And so like you just hear about these ridiculous stories and it's amazing, and it's some of the cool things that you get to see that you wouldn't in other fields. So
Praise the Lord. Yeah. I think one of hold on. Let's see a question. Let's see. I think I said. So one thing I really like you to share with everybody is you joined the IB Asian Christian Fellowship. So right at the beginning of the college. So can you tell us the experience and how did you decide to join that, and 4 years experience, how much that helped you? Because I think that's one of the most important things for everybody, all the youth who get into college, the first thing to join the Christian community.
yeah, so I mean, clearly Christianity is important to you guys, I think, if you're online right now. And I think that's really good because at the point where you leave for college, you, depending on how big of a step you decided to take, right? So some of you guys may be like, oh, I want to stay close to home. I want to stay close to community where I know people, versus some of you guys who are like, oh, I definitely want to leave. I want to start all over. I want to find something brand new. You have to make that choice on how important it is to you. For me personally, it was really important. And so immediately when I got onto campus, I started looking around for different communities. I went to a school where I knew nobody. And so into a new state where I knew nobody. And so that's your way to build a community is, right, you find somebody with something in common with you. And so Christianity is an easy one because it's important. And there's a fairly large community in the Midwest, at least. And so finding that and really willing to step forward and putting yourself out there. I think making friends is always a difficult thing. And in a college setting, it's completely different because those friends basically become family, right? And so having that relationship with other believers and seeing other believers together in community in a college setting is very different than you do at school or like back at home church. So you guys hang out and you guys have your Bible studies or you guys have your friendships that you hang out with. But it's much deeper inside college, and college provides you with more opportunities to step out in faith in ways that you never would. And so I think for me, that was a great time period to grow because a lot of leadership opportunities happened for me during that time. And it's like the time to challenge yourself to like see how strong my faith is. Really putting yourself out there in positions that you feel vulnerable, that you know this may not be what I'm really good at, but I want to see what God can do. And so I highly recommend you taking as much risk in your faith as you can in college because it is a safer spot to do it because you have that close community with you that you can build who are willing to take that risk with you and support you, right? So everyone's happy for you when you take a step out in faith. And as your faith grows, they're always with you during that moment. And so it's your chance to really explore and really find out where your gifts are and where your gifts aren't. And how much you actually trust in God to guide you. And I think we always talk about having that faith and trusting, but it's a really good time to put it into action. And so I think that's where you can grow a lot, right? And I feel like the majority of people grow in faith during their college years.
So what does a Christian fellowship usually do? Weekly, daily, monthly?
Yeah, so Asian Christian Fellowship, there are Bible studies. So the students lead the Bible studies, which is an opportunity for you also as a student to take a leadership position that you've never done. Leading a Bible study is very different, especially leading it amongst your peers. I think that's an opportunity. So Bible studies, and they also have weekly worship. And so Friday nights, we would have a worship, and then we would have a community hangout gathering to see your friends, kind of catch up. So having a social event after that. And then you kind of just volunteer and do a lot of random opportunities to evangelize. It's just depending on wherever you're at, they have different opportunities, but it's usually at least twice a week you get together.
So basically, all the close friends after graduate from college, all the close friends from the Christian fellowship.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Well, and in general, college is where you're going to meet probably your closest friends, right? So while you have great friends in high school, if you don't end up going to college with them, it's harder to keep those relationships. But when college, you're with them 24/7 essentially. And so those are the relationships that tend to just stay longer.
Yeah, that's what I think I observed. Both my daughter went to the Asian Christian Fellowship from Ivy. I can tell, after graduate and get into the professional field, all their friends just still still connected to each other's and very close relationship. And like my younger daughter, when they get married, just like a lot of friends come from all over the places to the wedding. And they all pretty much are from the same fellowship group. So I highly recommend all of you. The first thing you go to the college is find a Christian fellowship and committed to it for 4 years. And I'm pretty sure life forever changed for the better. I think that make a big difference. All right, we have a few minutes left. Any other questions?
Let's see. JY said, I heard many graduates moving to West Coast or East Coast due to weather, job opportunity, et cetera. You've been in different places. How do you compare Austin, Atlanta, Boston? Yeah, so I have been. And so that was a conscious decision I made also to be outside and explore, right? So use it as a time for college to move around, to find out where you fit best and what areas you enjoy. But that's also stepping out in faith, right? So you may go somewhere that you know nobody. But are you willing to take that opportunity to learn about yourself and what you enjoy doing? Boston is very different than any of the other places I've been to. So Boston, shockingly, I enjoyed a lot. The community, the walkability, job opportunities are great there. You're going to get paid higher there, but because the cost of living is so much higher, right? Super cold in Boston. So if you enjoy cold weather, do it. But that's very much like a very college city, right? So everyone you see is very smart, very educated, because you got Harvard right over there, you got MIT right over there, Boston University, Boston College, Northeastern, great hospitals. So everyone you meet is typically very educated. But if you're looking for more independence, not needing to drive, it's a great place to be, Boston. St. Louis is more small town, right? While it's still a city that people know about, it's much smaller. And so if you're looking for a college where you can have a smaller community, that's a good places to be. And then Austin is different in the views. And so while I'm still in Texas, it doesn't necessarily feel like Texas. For those of you who have visited Austin, far less conservative, more broad open thinking out here. But it is also not as culturally diverse as you would think. So those are the things in which, especially like college, you also need to find a church. There's not a typical church within the college campus. So when you go looking for churches, important to think about the area that you're in. So if you're looking for diversity, you're probably not going to find a lot in the Midwest, honestly. But if you're looking for a lot of Asian centric, right? So clearly West Coast is better. East Coast has some, but it's also limited, right? So depending on what you're looking for and where you want to go, I think those placements, East, West, Midwest, South, they're all very different. And so when you're thinking of colleges and figuring out, I think that's a good thing to think about, is like, where do I think I want to go? More Asians, more diversity, completely step out of my bubble and feel uncomfortable. Then you go further east.
So what's good about Austin? A lot of people like Austin.
Austin is fun. So there's a lot of things to do. It's a lot outdoorsy. Boston can be kind of intense, right? So a lot of professionals are out there too. Big cities tend to be more stressful feeling. Austin is less stressful. Everyone's here enjoying life, outdoorsy, new food spots. And I think that's why Austin's really great. I think where they're lacking is clearly diversity. So not a big Asian population down here. While you would think there would be more, because you have UT and a lot of people go there, and you've known a lot of people going, the actual people who stay and live, it's less. So it's hard to find specific groups or like suburbs or even areas where Asians just tend to gather. And so that's one of the things that's the negative about Austin, but positives is really good people. People are really nice here. And they're really accepting and open to a lot of stuff. So I think that's really nice.
All right, I think our time is up. We thank Alice for spending an hour and chatting with us. So if you have any other question for Alice in the future, just send me the email, or next time you can ask, okay? And I can pass the question to Alice. So let's have a closing prayer together. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for keeping us 1 hour together, and thank you for Alice sharing with us. Thank you for giving Alice the wonderful journey of a faith, that she can enjoy what she's doing today, and she's going to continue to enjoy your plan on her, and to fulfill your plan for her. We thank you for everything. We thank you for bringing all the youth together here. We ask for your blessing to their family and to each youth to know what they want to do and to have the passion to do what they need to do. We'll say the prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.